Hello and welcome to another video. In this one, we are back again with Alex, History of Legends. How long has it been since our last collab?
It's been too long. It's
Yeah,
been too
almost half
long.
a year actually.
What?
Yeah, not
No.
the group collab, but just us two. It was in
Really?
December.
No way.
Yep,
The Danish one?
yep, yeah. Well, let's not let it happen again.
No, no, no. It has to be more often.
Yeah. All right. That is what all my viewers keep telling me. Yo, do more with Alex. If
So
just
why
they
did you
knew.
invite me today? What
Yeah,
was so important when there's news of
yeah.
everything falling
So
apart?
we're
What?
recording this. We're recording this right after Citadel has fallen,
Why
and
did you
my
bring?
video is already out.
That's the strategy he does.
Yeah,
Viewers, that's the strategy he did. He takes me away from the reporting so he can get everything.
defeat in detail.
Yeah, Rommel strikes again. Too
Yeah.
smart, this guy.
So yeah, I called you because a Western expert, those guys, we
Oh,
love them. Oh wait. Let's refer to our old collaboration. When was Ukraine supposed to have Crimea?
April 1st.
What date is it today?
Not April 1st, after April 1st.
Yeah, and what does we say? What do we say to that?
Well, we're not yet at the siege of Sebastopol. Not yet.
So this was an expert. He decided, okay, let's give them 3 points. 3 points that's
Yeah,
going to make the best peace in Ukraine ever.
yeah.
So what does he say? He says that essentially no one can win this war. We'll just end up in a stalemate. So we should aim for peace. And what type of peace is optimal for Ukraine? Let's read the 3 points out loud, and I'll add it on screen in the editing. The West can provide genuine security guarantees without it involving NATO membership. This, together with military support and training, should ensure that Russia will never again get a bite of the apple, as in, not get more pieces of Ukraine, and that Ukraine will be able to defend the remaining territory in a far stronger military position than they would have ever been in.
Wait, sounds very familiar. Where did I hear this already?
I think.
Did he write this in
Hmm,
2023, or is it like the situation from 2015?
is he plagiarizing?
Maybe. When was this written?
Yeah, apparently it was today.
Today.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Today.
So, to you who don't know, to the viewers who don't know, let us educate you a little bit. The Minsk II agreement is essentially what this is.
Literally. They want to do a new Minsk the same way.
And just letting you know, Minsk II is already Minsk II. So they had Minsk agreement, Minsk II agreement. Now they want to do Minsk III. So that's why he added 3 points. Just the two previous
Celebration.
agreements with two
And we
and with
saw
another point.
how much it brought everyone to the peace table.
Mhm.
Like after in
Yeah.
2015, that's it. It ended and everybody was happy forever after. Yeah.
Honestly, the only situation where Putin would agree to such a peace deal would be if he felt lonely. Because if you remember, leading up to the war or the invasion, everyone wanted to meet Putin so often. Like he would get a visit every week or every other week.
Yeah.
Macron was with him like 2 or 3 weeks before the invasion started. So yeah, he
Yeah.
would be famous again.
Oh, yeah,
He
yeah,
could he could add an extra foot or an extra meter to the table,
yeah.
so they could sit even further apart. All right, let's get to point number two. Ukraine needs to be integrated into the EU, which fundamentally will signal that this is a European war. it, it will simultaneously strengthen democratic institutions. It will simultaneously strengthen democratic institutions in Ukraine, lead to economic reforms, and bolster the viability of the Ukrainian government leadership. Let's be serious for another paragraph. It still has more. The West must provide money to rebuild Ukraine. Much of this will have to come from Europe and some from the United States, Japan, and other countries, but also from Russia. Though they seized and frozen Russian assets in many Western countries. So let's break this down. Let's break this down in a very, very simple way. He makes 4 points. First point, he wants security guarantees for Ukraine without it being a NATO member.
Okay.
I have a question for that. What is the difference between NATO giving security guarantees and it being a NATO member? They're already a NATO partner, which means they get training, they get weapons, they get all of that stuff. Adding on top of that security guarantees, which would essentially be Article 5, then they might as well be a member.
Yeah.
The only difference is they would not be obligated to defend them, because although it is a guarantee, they were already guaranteed.
Yeah.
If you remember from the deal in 1994, where they said Russia, United States, United Kingdom, and Ukraine all agreed Ukraine will give up its nuclear arsenal, and then no one will invade them.
Yeah.
Simple, great agreement. Clap, clap, clap. Didn't live up to it. No one followed up. So, security guarantees doesn't mean anything. The second part, they want Ukraine to become an EU country with EU values. You know, democracy, freedom.
Democracy.
Freedom.
Democracy.
Have you seen? Did you remember the Patreon missile system video where they launched 32 missiles?
Yeah.
Apparently, I think it was 6 or 8. I don't remember the exact number. Bloggers in Ukraine, in Kiev, who recorded it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they have all been arrested by the SBU.
Yeah. There's another person we know that got
arrested. So me and Alex and Dima, Military Summary, were on a show a little over a month ago. And he is no longer with us because the SBU knocked on his door, pointed assault rifles at his face. And
no, that's not how it happened.
Oh yeah,
democratic values.
Democratic values, exactly.
Pointed democratic values. Yeah. But I think let's talk about the democracy part a little bit, because I had this discussion. I don't know with who again, but this entire war could have been avoided if there was actual democracy and democratic process in Ukraine. Because check this out. So the people in Eastern Ukraine always voted a bit different from the people in the West, okay? Now, the people in the East spoke more Russian. And then you had the government in Kiev that wanted to push Ukrainian language more than Russian. But the people in Crimea, in Donbass, they say, no, we prefer Russian. So we can go more in depth into the topic, but they get less funding from the government for public institutions and all this. And there was a little separatist seed growing. All right. Now, if there was a vote of do they want to be independent? Okay, there's one thing. And going independent is a huge step. So let's say they decided to become autonomous within Ukraine. They could have had Ukrainian citizenship, but their own little language laws that exist in the many countries, like in Spain, you have Catalonia. I don't know how you say it in English, but
Catalonia.
The Catalans have their own language, but they're Spanish, and everybody's happy. And in that scenario, it could have been a win-win for everybody. And who knows, maybe the Ukraine could have entered the EU, could have strengthened their economy, and maybe Russians would have immigrated to Ukraine to have access to all that good stuff. No.
True. But let me play you a hypothetical scenario. So the situation happens in 2014. The civil war starts. The population doesn't actually want the civil war, so they decide to enter in a ceasefire agreement. The first one doesn't go so well, so they make a second one. And in that second one, the Donbass region actually gets autonomy. That is what the deal is. But a specific country doesn't live up to those deal, and they just somewhat hold up to the ceasefire. And that ceasefire is called the Minsk II Agreement. So yeah, they actually had the deal in place for autonomy for Donbass. They just didn't uphold it.
But for all of Donbass, or just for all of Donbass, or just for the separatist held regions? Like,
I'm not really that much into the specifics, but as far as I know,
neither.
it would be that they wouldn't be separatists anymore. They would just be an autonomous region within Ukraine, and then it would hold the whole Donbass area.
Okay.
But I believe it could possibly be that. I think that's about it. Someone can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong.
But then the problem would be Crimea, because then there was the intervention in Crimea that kind of like stirred the pot. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I guess.
yeah. So that's the thing. The entire problem is that there could have been more discussions about the events, and we can even go to the Maidan and all this. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of talks to go through with this aspect. But now the solution is that they go with the EU, that there's a ceasefire. The solution is Minsk.
Yeah.
Minsk
Let's
too.
continue the solution. So the next point they make is that they want to rebuild Ukraine. So they want to use Western money, send it to Ukraine, and rebuild Ukraine.
More money.
On top of the money we've already sent. So here we see that there are multiple things that go wrong. And some things actually make sense. So I made a list of merits and demerits to this. And I'll just go through them, and then you can tell me what you think of those.
Okay.
So first of all, let's go through the merits. What benefits is there to these agreements? First of all, the security guarantees. If Ukraine receives proper security guarantees that they can actually trust in, they as a country would feel more secure. Everyone wants that. I want that, you want that, everyone wants that. Everyone wants Ukraine to feel secure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a merit to this agreement. Then for Ukraine, in its current government, current stance, and with the current divide, a merit to the government. Not saying everyone would be happy about this within Ukraine, and not everyone within the whole world, but the Ukrainian government would be happy with this, and that is the military support and training. The military support and training has shown that Ukraine is able to hold back Russia for at least a year. So Ukraine,
but it would be too late. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the entire purpose of this is not to arrive to this scenario. So it's kind of pointless,
Yeah.
you know.
But the point is, if you have a large military, no one wants to invade you.
Yeah, for sure. But
I'm pretty sure no one wants to invade the United States.
imagine if Ukraine stops now and just rebuilds a new army with the borders they have now. We know they're not happy with the current borders, so it's just going to lead to another war. No questions asked. I don't understand how it's going to bring peace. The Ukrainians said they want the borders of 1991. They'll go for it.
The issue here lies within the idea that the narrative that the West wants to promote is that Ukraine is ultimately fighting for its own existence. It doesn't want to attack, it only wants to defend. And that's what this whole thing is about, defending themselves. If they were hypothetically to build up a large army, then it would be for self-defense, not for taking back their territory. But we have seen, honestly, from Zelensky, he's been very honest with this part specifically. He wants to take back all of Ukraine. That is an ultimate deal he has put on the table. He says, there's no peace with Russia unless we get back Crimea and the Donbass and everything. So he's 100% set on that. He's not going to give up the Donbass. He's not going to give up Crimea. He wants 100% of Crimea, of Ukrainian territory from 1991. So in the end, this is a merit for the current regime. That's why I said it. For the current government, that is a merit for them, because they want to take back the 1991 borders. The third one, Again, this would be most of Europe would be happy with this. Most of Ukraine would be happy with this, because in and of itself, the European Union has a very strong economic base. The issue here lies with everything that comes with the EU. That is the political and the foreign policy and all of these things that go with it. If Ukraine becomes part of the EU, then they automatically have to be anti-Russia. That is the current stance. Prior to this war, then the EU and Russia weren't necessarily enemies. There were some issues here and there, but in essence, they were on good terms. They traded a lot with each other. The problem is, for Russia, there's no guarantee that it will stay that way. As we've seen, the EU can change its stance very quickly based on what happens. Russian culture, Russian governments, and so on doesn't align with European cultures and morals and so on. So they'll eventually end up clashing. So for some, this is a merit. For others, this is a demerit. By the way, most of the things I put in the merits are also in the demerits. You can argue for both. And then finally, economic support is a huge merit for Ukraine specifically, because they'll get handouts from everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Like,
let's hope they go to the right places.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's go to the demerits. Okay, so the first one, security guarantees. Repeat. So the problem here is that Ukraine having to rely on other countries for security guarantees means they have to rely on those other countries. If they pull back, they are not safe. So in essence, they will not be independent when it comes to their national security. So that is a huge demerit for Ukraine. EU integration, that's also a demerit. Why is that? Because it will be a very, very lengthy process. It's not something that they can just do like that.
Although they can, if they want, they can, but
yeah, exactly. The issue is that corruption is deeply rooted within the Ukrainian society. It is something, here we are, even Denis Davidov made a video where he talked about corruption in Ukraine.
Oh, he said it.
He said it, I can say it.
He said it.
Yeah, and so essentially, it is an obstacle for Ukraine to become a part of the EU, because it's a lengthy process. They have to adapt to all of these laws, they have to do all of these things, and they're just not really there yet. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 5, if they're really good, but not in a year or two. And if a ceasefire happens, they would need to be in a year or two for the merits to be there. Because what's the point of becoming a part of the EU if Russia controls you?
Yeah.
Third point, military support and training. Repeat again. So this issue again, it increases tensions for Ukraine to have a large army. As you mentioned, if Ukraine has a large army, then they would be looking to retake the territory that Russia took from them. So that would raise tension. There would be an arms race between Ukraine and Russia, and Russia would feel very threatened.
Especially if they have the backup of other countries. And then the other countries can jump in. So
exactly.
So it's going to be World War III. It's going to be World War III.
And seeing Ukraine, which is Russia's neighbor, become part of NATO, for example, or the NATO guarantees without being a part of NATO, which is essentially the same, then Russia would look to make compromises with their friends to become allies, like China, India, and so on. Like, give them something in return for their support. And then we would see, as you said, World War III. Because alliances are built to wage war.
The thing is, for now, the Baltic countries were part of NATO. Finland now is part of NATO. So in a way, there's this entire border that the Russians have now to guard, right? Regardless, all right? But I don't think that they have the same problem with these countries, although there are tensions. I'm not going to deny it, especially with the Russian-speaking populations in the Baltics, but that's a long topic. With Ukraine, it's a you hit right for at home, right? You hit right at home, and it's the belly of the Russian region. If we talk about geography,
Yeah.
so the what I find just tragic is that people in 1991 already spoke about the future problems that would happen in Donbass in Ukraine over how the borders were drawn. And it just reminds me of what happened in Africa in a lot of places. We have a lot of wars because the borders have been drawn a bit at random, and they worked when it was all part of colonial empires, just like the USSR. The borders made no real sense. It was just administrative.
Yeah.
But now that they're independent, some people are on the wrong side of the border, and I feel that's the problem with Ukraine. So yeah, you could draw a new border. I don't think it would work. The security guarantees, new army, it's just going to be a new round. I don't see any of this helping.
Yeah. Looking at it at a historical context, none of this is a surprise, and anyone would have guessed it, and many have guessed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the final thing, economic support and asset seizure. So the 4 merit points are also 4 demerit points. So both are a side of the same coin. So what is the issue with foreign support? Well, first of all, no one is going to give handouts. It's all going to be in the form of debts. And they will essentially be controlled by Western countries because they all own all of their assets. And taking the confiscated, seized assets from Russia and putting it into Ukraine, that would be a further escalating manner, as taking Russia's money is essentially stealing it, because it goes against the agreements that Russia had with those countries when they had their money there.
But it's bad for the countries that had the money, because who else wants to place money in these countries?
Exactly, they're
knowing
stealing.
that no, but they're stealing. But I'm looking in the future. You can do that this trick once, but all the countries, like a lot of Iranians are living in the UK, for example, or Indians. You have Chinese a bit everywhere. You
Yeah.
have people from all over the world putting money in these safe places because if you put money in the bank, it's because you don't want people to steal it. Now, if some countries decide to take it for X reason, well, people are going to put their money to other places. And it's a bad move. Short term, maybe, but long term, I don't know.
Yeah, but also with the debts, the second largest debt holder for the United States is China. If they lose all of that, they would have to pay all of that back, and that wouldn't spell very well for the U.S. economy, especially right now.
Yeah. It's this is a topic that's it goes very deep. Like a lot of, and the problem of debt is that some people invested in your country, but you owe like it. Everybody's
Yeah.
connected.
Mm-hmm. So something like this would spell a huge issue because of how interconnected the economical system is.
What I feel from this article is just another perspective of a lot of people have a completely outdated view of the situation, and it's just bad. Like the article we saw about Crimea. I don't understand how people can write this and honestly put this online while believing what's being written. I For me, it's too much. It's like the video I did on Taiwan, the war game
Yeah.
organized by NBC. I don't understand how people can actually come up with these conclusions. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And same thing for this article. It doesn't make sense. It's as if the guy just read on the situation, 5 minutes, a few articles, BBC, The Guardian, and boom, here's a solution. There's no solution at all.
Yeah.
And historically speaking, the problem here is that he starts by the foundation that Russia loses, because he says they're going to take the assets from Russia and use it to rebuild Ukraine. But history is violent, and it doesn't work like that. It's the loser that pays.
Yep.
It's not the one who has more money no matter what. It's the one that loses the war that pays the price. That's the way it's done. It's
Yep.
not about justice. right? So like there's a saying that says "Vae victis," you know. So if you know what it means, comment below. But essentially, that's this. You know, it's a dishonor to the loser, in a way. So the one's gonna pay is the one that loses the war, and that's the only conclusion we can make out of it.
Yeah. And looking at it like from the perspective of Russia, because the whole issue started when Russia wanted something to do with Ukraine. So a lot of pro-Ukrainians keep saying, well, Russia could just not have invaded Ukraine, but they like context in that sentence. And then we have a lot of neutral and even pro-Russians who are uneducated on this matter.
Mm-hmm.
So let's give a bit of context as to why Russia has an interest in Ukraine. So first of all, well, most of it is based on geography. So the whole idea of Ukraine is that it is a geopolitical catastrophe for Russia to have Ukraine on an opposite side. And by opposite side, I mean anything that isn't friendly. And why do I say that? It is because of multiple factors. The first one is that Ukraine is a vast country. It is very long, it's very large, and it's all flatlands. Russia as a country is mostly flatlands, especially the western part. It's located in the northern European plain. You can go from Paris to Moscow and you'll be going in a straight line essentially. There's no hills, no mountains, no natural barriers. So this whole area is essentially, in case of war, very bad for Russia. Their whole strategy has always been, we are a vast country, we are a large country. If the enemy comes, we run away until they get tired, essentially. They did it against Napoleon, they did it in World War II, and they're even doing it today in Ukraine. Whenever the Ukrainians attack, they run away.
They tried during World War One, it did not work.
Yeah. No, in that one, they just kept advancing until their internal strife began.
They did retreat. But then it collapsed, and the Germans they came. Actually, the problem was that the Germans collapsed too.
True. All right, but yeah, essentially, so the Russians, the biggest Russian issue would be if they cannot retreat, because that is their main strategy. It's been their main strategy for 200 years. So they need as much territory as possible. So just the territory of Ukraine itself is beneficial for Russia. The second part is the ethnic and cultural and familial ties between the two countries. Like Gorbachev, who was the final Soviet president, chancellor, whatever his name was, his title name was, his mother was Ukrainian, his father was Russian.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very, very common story in Russia and in Ukraine, that they are mixed. They are very close together, both culturally, language-wise, and familial ties.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the final part is the warm sea ports. Of all the ports Russia has, Sevastopol is by far the best one, and that is because year-round it's not frozen water.
Mm-hmm.
They can use it at all times of the year.
Mm-hmm.
The one in St. Petersburg, it freezes. Everything to the north of Russian borders, it freezes. Mm-hmm. In the Far East, what was it? What's the
Vladivostok.
Vladivostok, exactly. Thank you. Vladivostok, it freezes. So the only port Russia has that is warm year-round, so essentially all of their exports go through, is Sevastopol.
Mm-hmm.
If that is in Ukrainian hands, it is economic and geopolitical disaster for Russia. That is why in 2014, when the regime change happened, they went in, no hesitation, and took it. Because they know without Sevastopol, the country will essentially not exist.
Mm-hmm.
So they seized all of the Crimean assets and took it into their own hands. Because if it's not Ukraine, if it's not Russian, then no one can have it. Essentially, that is their stance on Crimea. So the situation is essentially that Russia without Crimea, without Ukraine, is a disaster.
Yeah, the thing is that the Russians had the base in Crimea, and I think the problem, correct me if I'm wrong, audience. The problem, I think, was that the lease had to be renewed, and there was a problem with the renewal of the base. And this is what caused tensions too. Like during Maidan or in this era, the pro-Russian, what we call the pro-Russian Ukraine president, signed a renewal of the lease, and then the next one canceled it, or something like this. So for the Russians, it was a question of losing this base, and then they believed that having all of Crimea would secure the rights to the base because it would be hard to attack physically. You have to cross a body of water and everything. So I think this was the one of the situations. I think the Russians also have a base in Syria, Tartus, and when there was the war in Syria, they also intervened because they didn't want to lose that naval base, which is also in the Mediterranean and pretty strategic. So, so yeah, the but it goes back to the same thing of the Soviet Union and the way the borders were drawn. Crimea was given to the administrative region of Ukraine, and when it became independent, it joined the borders. But that's the typical problem of redrawing borders. There's always tension.
And to anyone who says, "Well, it couldn't it have been done in a better way?" Yes, there could have been national referendums or referendums in those specific areas, like Crimea having a referendum. What do they want to join? Donbass having a referendum. Who do they want to join? It has happened before. After World War One, the southern parts of Denmark. No, it was probably after World War Two. Southern parts of Denmark and northern parts of Germany, they all held referendum by the border. And then who wanted to join Denmark, joined Denmark. Who wanted to join Germany, don't join Germany. They could have done the same in Ukraine and Russia. The borders bordering each other, Donbass and so on, they could have voted who do they want to join. But when the Soviet Union ended, they probably thought, well, Russia and Ukraine are going to be friends forever. So it probably never crossed their mind. And then time went on, and then the 2014 thing happened, and then suddenly they are at war.
Yeah,
Life just goes that way.
but once again, there was already this seed. I think there was the seed, and I read a lot about the history of Ukraine, the history of Russia. Then I don't want this video to go on for 10 hours, but yeah, I think Russia has a love-hate relationship with Ukraine too. Sometimes the central government in Moscow used Ukrainian nationalism to their advantage, and sometimes they repressed this nationalist feeling. So there was always this duality, right?
Yeah. So generally, it's a very, very complicated mess. So what is our verdict for the experts' 3 points of peace?
Well, mine is the same as the other articles you showed me. It's pretty disappointing that pieces like this are still written to this day. If somebody writes this in the first few days, all right, maybe they have the benefit of the doubt. But now we know how all this did not work. This is not a solution.
So in the end, the conclusion is he shouldn't plagiarize what happened 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And he should just come up with original ideas. Then we would listen with our ears and hearts and minds open.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this isn't a solution. This is all just look at me. I am very smart. I come up with an idea that came from 2015 and didn't work, but it's gonna work this time.
If we think hard enough, it's gonna work.
We just gotta be open-minded. And Russia's already lost, so they will agree.
100%.
100%. They'll be happy to oblige.
The Russian army is fleeing, so yeah. It's a matter of time.
It's a matter of time. All right, I think that's gonna be all. Thank you for joining me again, and I'm looking forward to the next time we collab. It's gonna be fairly soon, I believe.
Fairly soon, yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? No spoiler. No
spoilers. But yeah, that's gonna be all for this video. Thank you all for joining us. It has been History Legends, and I hope you'll
My
see
pleasure.
a lot more of both of us. So go check out his channel, and see you all next time.